Hey guys, it's time to review the new album from Bring Me the Horizon called That's the Spirit.
So take a deep breath, let's disappear. No one will listen, so why are we still here?
So Bring Me the Horizon are a metalcore act out of the UK, and they've been around for the better part of the last decade. They've kind of always borderlined between their metalcore sound, and their first album was kind of this deathcore scene album. They've always kind of borderlined between that sound where you might expect to hear some really heavy songs and a lot of screaming and things like that, in songs with some more pop sensibility to them. Particularly the album Suicide Season, with a lot of their tracks like The Chelsea Smile is particularly kind of groovy, poppy song on there. Diamonds Are Forever is another song that kind of has that chanty chorus going on. We Will Never Sleep. And they've always kind of been there. They've always been I would say, the outer edge of metalcore. If you think of kind of more obscure bands as being in the center, Bring Me the Horizon has kind of always been on the edge of that. They've always kind of been leaning towards pop and mainstream metal or mainstream hard rock and things like that. Their last album, Sempiternal, kind of brought a lot more, I would say, mainstream sound into a more hard rock sound, but at the same time, it was still a very diverse album, a lot of electronic work in there. It also dealt with a lot of issues that you're not going to hear on generally mainstream or pop music, things like that. A lot of existential issues, religious issues, lines like, when you die, the only kingdom you'll see is 2 foot wide and 6 foot deep. Lines like that were clever and biting and really well done off that album, and it really impressed me. That's the Spirit kind of shifts it over to the more pop side. If they were on the edge before, they've kind of pushed it all the way over to the mainstream rock and to kind of pop. But the good thing is, that's not really a bad thing. They have delivered a fairly strong album to us. Now, right off the bat, you're going to get a sense of what That's the Spirit is going to sound like. They start right into the song Doomed, which is kind of the slow intro. It's got some vocal samplings of what sounds like sounds of passion going on, and then Ollie Sykes comes in with everything, and it's fantastic as far as an opening track. Honestly, it's a little bit short to me. I know it's just an intro kind of song, but I enjoy that song. It's probably one of the better ones off of the album. And from Doomed, the opener, we go right into Happy Song, and this is a song that they kind of released previously before this album actually dropped. And it's kind of a grungy song. It's very kind of throwback to, I would say, late 90s hard rock and kind of grunge style to it, mixed with some newer metalcore sounds as well. And it's catchy, and it's just a fun song to listen to. And that's kind of a theme throughout this album. Most of the songs that are borderline on the hardcore or mainstream radio rock sound that throw in some of the pop catches and things like that, they're usually well done on this album. There's very few songs that kind of don't hit home. There's definitely a few on there that kind of may not last over time. I could see some of them that might get annoying over time or might stop listening to them. The only track I particularly didn't enjoy, at least not right away, is the song True Friends. It just sounds a little corny and a little cheesy to me, especially that chorus line that they have. And it's one of those songs where, thankfully, unlike the song Antivist on Sempiternal, it's not that corny or that cheesy as far as an anthem song goes. Thankfully, it is actually still enjoyable as a song. It's not cringeworthy like that Antivist was, but not to the point of Antivist. It's still a decent song. They come closest to their a love song with the song Follow You, but it's still a fairly dark song for a love song especially. You have lines in there like, you can drag me through hell as long as I can hold your hand, and it's pretty moving and pretty powerful. And not to mention the actual instrumentals on that track are kind of a nice blend of the electronic with the guitar riffs and things like that. And then the first track they released off this album, which they kind of released a while ago, called Drown, is a little bit amped up for the album version of it. The drum work has definitely kind of seen a increase in here. There's not much. The differences are fairly subtle, but they're enough you're going to probably pick up on them if you listen to them back to back especially. And as far as which version I like better, I'd probably say the album version a little more amped up. It's a little more energetic, hits a little bit harder than the video version did. And I think a lot of that has to do with some of the feedback they probably got from that video, and it goes a long way to this album in general, which is to say it's not as heavy or as hard. I mean, it's not even heavy at all, really, than anything they've done in the past, which kind of brings me to what I want to talk about, something I'm going to mention in another video that I'm going to do about why I don't do review scores normally. And that's to say that how you feel about this album is probably going to depend about how you actually feel about Bring Me the Horizon. If you're coming from Bring Me the Horizon and expecting, what you've gotten in the past, which was that heavy metalcore with, like I said, some kind of poppiness mixed into it, some catchy hooks, things like that, some pretty kind of awesome choruses that they had going on, you're not really going to find that here. It's much, much more toned down than anything they've done in the past. Like I said, it's not really a heavy album at all. I mean, the closest comparisons to other bands I can really give is this album sounds a lot like what Linkin Park kind of gave us with Meteora, especially with the song Throne, which sounds kind of exactly like the song Faint from Linkin Park. Not to the point where I think Linkin Park should be going out and getting a lawyer, but the similarities are very, very evident if you listen to them, especially if you listen to them back to back. That said, it sounds like that kind of style that Linkin Park had kind of pioneered back in the late 90s and early 2000s, and it also kind of sounds like a mix of that and almost like AFI's December Underground to a point, where they threw in the electronic work with their kind of hardcore roots. And like I said, it really depends what you're looking for. If you're looking for what could now be considered classic Bring Me the Horizon, you're really not going to find it. If you're looking for a kind of a dark poppy album with some edginess to it, you're going to probably find something that you enjoy. So I really think older Bring Me the Horizon fans are probably going to be split down the middle in terms of liking this album and seeing it for what it is, which is a very strong album. I don't like it as much as I did Sempiternal. I don't think it's as good as that album, but it's still a very strong album. There's nothing bad about this album. And unfortunately, there's going to be people who just can't get past the fact that it doesn't sound like Bring Me the Horizon anymore, and it doesn't sound like Suicide Seasons, and it doesn't sound like, There's a Hell, and they're not going to be able to get past that, and they're probably going to hate that and not even give this album a chance. And then there's people who probably are going to be able to at least give this a chance, whether it's because they're drawn to the poppier side of Bring Me the Horizon, or because they're actually willing to see past the changes to give this album a chance. To kind of sum everything up, I mean, it's a definite strong album. If you've never listened to Bring Me Horizon in the past, I wouldn't suggest starting with this album, because it's such a drastic shift from anything that they've done in the past. If you're somebody who's kind of always stayed away from them, because they've been too poppy, I think the shift over to that side is probably enough at this point where you can excuse them for being a metalcore band and kind of take this album for what it is, which is pretty much a radio rock, hardcore, pop album.